Thanks for watching Numbskull News, and today we're going to let the Pac-12 have a rest. We've been kicking them in the junk for a little too long, maybe. Let's let them sort their crap out for a while, and we're going to turn our focus on the ACC. Of course, everyone's heard, the Florida State AD came out, had a big press conference, and a big to-do about that. Of course, Clemson followed suit, saying a lot of the same things that, they need an unequal split in the ACC. And if you think about it, none of this stuff's a surprise. We've heard all this stuff before. And you know damn well Florida State and Clemson want to get the hell out of the ACC. That's the bottom line with all of it. Everyone knows it. We've known it for months now. They saw what Texas and OU did. They saw what USC did. And they're like, hey, we got to find a way to get that done. And we can't wait to 2036 to do it. So the first step is this unequal revenue split, right? Unequal revenue sharing, where Florida State and Clemson would get the majority of the money out of their TV deal. So if I'm the smaller schools, if I'm Wake Forest, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Boston College, Pitt, Louisville, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, I just rattled off, 9 schools there? I'm saying no. And not only no, but hell no. You signed the deal. We're all going to make this money. We're not giving up money just for you. That way you can find a way to leave either in 2036 or before. No, stop it. We're not doing it. And they shouldn't. Look, the Big 12 let Texas and OU run roughshod over the conference for years and years. And look what happened. They ended up leaving anyway and left the rest of the members in survival mode. And they did a good job. They rose to the challenge, and now the Big 12 is pretty much stable. And look at the mess the Pac-12's in. USC ran roughshod over the Pac-12 forever. They were thinking about adding teams before. They wouldn't do it, and that's because of USC. And then USC leaves anyway and leaves them, just with a mess on their hands. And that's exactly what Florida State and Clemson is going to do to you if you allow it to happen. Do not, I repeat, do not go with an unequal revenue split. Hell no. What do you do at that point? All right, because they're probably going to lawyer up and hope to the good Lord above that they could find a sympathetic judge that could possibly let them out of their grant of rights or their TV deal, whatever. But really, the role ESPN has with the ACC is massive. They own those rights. That's a damn good deal for ESPN and the Disney Corporation. They're hurting for money. Bob Iger's cutting and slashing everywhere he can, laying people off left and right. So do they really just want to hand over more money for what? It doesn't make financial sense, especially right now for Disney. But on the other side, all right, the ACC is all content that ESPN really needs. They can't afford to lose that. And they want to try to find a way to keep Florida State and Clemson happy. That's 2 of their biggest draws, 2 of their big earners. And I know ESPN has the SEC. I get that. But those 2 schools still generate a lot of revenue for ESPN. So you have to find a way to make them happy. You don't want them, whether it's 2036 or before, you don't want them going off to the Big Ten land, because then Fox will now have their rights. And that's not good for ESPN. Even though ESPN and Fox, they work together all the time. They're not, I don't know, they're kind of competitors, but kind of not. They're also business partners. That's 2 of the ESPN's bigger brands. That's what this stuff's about. It's about brands, it's about matchups and all that crap. All this consolidation in the 2 conferences, it's what it's about. And they're not trying, ESPN is not trying to lose brands and lose possible matchups and lose money. So they're going to have to get creative on what you do with Florida State and Clemson. Some kind of deal they need to work out that will allow Florida State and Clemson out of that conference and into the SEC. There's been all this talk about, hey, you just need 8 schools to dissolve the conference or dissolve the grant of rights or whatever the hell. And maybe you do. I still don't know about all that. However, I do believe there's a way to make everybody happy, a possible way, and that would be an ACC and Big 12 merger. So once Florida State and Clemson leave to the SEC, you merge what's left of those conferences together. And I know there's people out there, UNC fans especially, oh, hell no, we ain't going to the Big 12. Well, it's a little bit more money. I mean, you would basically, they would, with the merger, you would take on the Big 12 contract. So you make a little bit more money per team, and you're out of the contract in 2031 instead of 2036. So that gets you out early. So that way, if you can find your way to the Big 10 like you think you can, then do so. It would be the same thing with Miami. I see Miami and UNC as kind of like Oregon and Washington, but on the East Coast, right? They have a lot of value, big brands. Are they blue bloods? Personally, I think Miami kind of is, but then again, they are a small private school, but they're worth a lot of money. They get good ratings. They're in a great market. UNC, of course, has a bunch of pluses. Did a whole video on that shit before. So you may say, well, why don't they just let UNC and Miami go to the Big Ten right now? No, because that's ESPN. They're, like I said, they need that content, and they're not looking to get out of it. So I think what they see is they don't want to lose the content, but I think they'd be willing to share it, because the only way a merger like that could really happen, ESPN, of course, would fund the lion's share of it, but you would still need Fox to come in and help fund a lot of it. Possibly CBS, because they did have interest in the Pac-12 once upon a time. So they may be interested in getting in a little bit of that, of this big, huge mega conference that would turn out to be. And possibly get Amazon on board too to help alleviate some of the cost. I think if you did that, ESPN still has all the content that they need. I think Fox would, increase some of their basketball content that they like. Amazon gets their foot in the door of college sports, and ESPN doesn't have to flip the bill for everything. They might even be able to save a few pennies here or there. Now they can make more money with Florida and Clemson being in the SEC and the kind of matchups you'll get. Like Florida versus Texas, Clemson versus Alabama, and so on and so forth. It has a better ring to it than, Florida State versus Syracuse. And all apologies to Syracuse, but it's Syracuse. The final piece of this, would the Big 12 be willing to do it? Because they didn't want to merge with the Pac-12, but I think that's a different story altogether. The Pac-12 is a good football conference, but it's kind of top-heavy. Their top 4, 5, 6 teams are really good. Their bottom feeders are horrible. Cal, Stanford, Colorado, just Arizona State. They're all horrible. And I just listed 5 teams out of 10. In basketball, you got like one team, Arizona, that really matters when it comes to basketball. I know there's other schools, they compete, they get into the tournament once in a while, but Arizona they're the class of that whole of that conference. That's not even close when it comes to basketball. And we know Brett Yormark, and very wisely, wants to build the basketball brand of the Big 12. And with those two conferences merged together, because the ACC is a basketball conference. I know they got some good football teams and 2 blue bloods at that, but this is a basketball conference. The Big 12, very competitive in football. You just got a team to the national championship game. I think one of the most exciting football conferences out there, but really, it's also a basketball conference. I mean, I think top to bottom, they offer a lot more than the ACC does in football. However, basketball, it's elite. And if you merge those two conferences, man, the NCAA tournament runs through that mega conference every year. So let's call it the Big 24. I think that's Big 12 is 12 teams. You minus the 2 big dogs out of the ACC, and you're left with 12 teams. So the Big 24 would just rule college basketball. I mean, you imagine the ratings of just that Big 24, conference tournament every year. It would rival the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying it would equal it or eclipse it, but man, it would get close. Just the matchups in that thing would just be otherworldly. But other than the basketball, does it make sense to the Big 12 to do this? I think it would, because look, you're trying to grow as much as possible. Well, that's a wall of growth right there. And would turn you into a 24 team conference. And we're not talking about group of five schools here. We're talking about legit schools: UNC, Louisville, Miami, Virginia Tech, and Virginia. I know Virginia's kind of sucked at football for a while, so has Virginia Tech. But both those teams have the ability to turn that thing around. Even that mega conference, like just like that, even if it stayed together for decades, it would never rival the Big Ten or the SEC in money, right? It just wouldn't. But you would solidify yourself as a reasonably close number 3 conference. And a lot of that would be spearheaded by basketball being by far the greatest basketball conference ever even thought of. And with something like that, I mean, in the hands of Brett Yormark, and by the way, a merger between those two conferences, I think we can all agree we would want Brett Yormark to run that sucker. Period. End of story. But I think in his capable hands, he could promote the living hell out of that. That would be huge. And everyone's like, well, basketball just doesn't earn that much. It would earn a hell of a lot more in that mega conference than anyone ever thought basketball can earn. I still think you throw Gonzaga in there, and my God, man, this that thing becomes fun. One day the Big Ten take UNC. Don't know. Miami, I think, is more likely just because it's a bigger brand and it's in a bigger market. More importantly, it's Florida. And that's some of the prime recruiting ground in football, period, in the story. I think there's a pretty good chance that they may take Miami one day. Overall, what we learned, over the weekend with Florida State and Clemson is that, some shit can go down with the ACC. And I think it's kind of legit. I was always steadfast that they're going to stay together till 2036 because the grant of rights is just too freaking ironclad. ESPN there's no incentive for them to do anything. But when you have two big brands like that currently are owned by ESPN, they want to keep those partners happy. So there may be something to be figured out. And I'm not saying it's going to be the next couple of months. It may take a couple of years to figure this thing out. But yeah, I mean, a merger between an ACC without Florida State and without Clemson with the Big 12, that is very possible. Anyway, that's all I got on this crap. I'll be back with some other crap later. Bye.